Hello everybody, welcome to episode 4 of the Confederate Independence Timeline. We are going from 1923 to 1944. Hope you enjoy. In 1923, with the African American Revolution, or the Slave Revolution, whatever you want to call it, the rebels in the KKK are fighting all across the country, or the Confederacy, which kills thousands. Also, in 1923, President Warren Harding of the United States passes away due to a stroke. This happens in real time, which Vice President Calvin Coolidge becomes the 28th Vice President, or 28th U.S. President. Excuse me. In the 1924 election, President Coolidge passes the year, President Coolidge passes the Indian Citizenship Act. He gives Native Americans in the Union States citizenship, voting rights, everything. In the Confederacy, President McAdoo sends in the military in hopes of quelling said revolution. It fails tremendously. But in the 1924 election, Republican President Calvin Coolidge defeats Progressive Senator Robert Follett and Reform Mayor Charles Bryan, 276-46. The Reform Party is dying, but is overtaken by a farther left party, the Progressive Party, which is farther to the left than it should be. Farther left in this time than it is before. They're not so far to Bernie Sanders left, but they're pretty far left. They're more Elizabeth Warren kind of far left. In 1925, President McAdoo meets with African-American rebel leader Martin Luther King, not Jr., Sr., this guy. Yep, MLK's daddy. In 1926, Presidents Coolidge and McAdoo signs the Air Commerce Act. That happens in both countries. They're not the same bill, but they're very similar. President McAdoo meets with Britain and France, their diplomats to discuss trade and alliance relations. And this is where, slavery is becoming a big issue. Get rid of it. In 1927, the Southern Native Americans joined the African American rebels in the Revolution, which is now called the Freedom Revolution. So Southern Native Americans, who are essentially not given any freedoms either, it's essentially just white men and women. They get their rights, but everybody else's no. They join the African American rebels in this fight. But Democrat President William McAdoo defeats Whig Senator Charles Curtis, the first Native American nominee. So he does it. He wins the Senate. He wins the senator from Kansas, which there they have, state rights and all that. But he still loses to McAdoo. Curtis wins Cuba, but Sorona, Chihuahua, Durango, and Coahuila all go to McAdoo. In 1929, President McAdoo passes the 15th Amendment, which is a 3-for-1 deal. It ends slavery, gives all minorities the right to vote, and it ends all forms of segregation. He passes that. He convinces both houses of Congress to pass it. He said the fighting's been going on long enough. Just let them have what they want. They've earned it. Just give it to them. And he says a bunch of other stuff. But the 1928 election, Republican Senator Herbert Hoover defeats Progressive Al Smith 193 to 129 to become the 29th Union States President. The Progressive Party is now starting to get their bearings. They're getting former reform politicians to join their cause. Some of the reform candidates who aren't far left are going to join the Republican Party or just become independent or retire from politics in this timeline. In 1929, President McAdoo passes the 16th Amendment. He says, okay, there's clearly a problem. And he passes the poll tax ban amendment. So there's no such thing as a poll tax anymore. Also, the Great Depression hits both countries. So the Great Depression hits, and it hits hard. 1930, President Hoover signs the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, which damages the Union States even more. 1931, the Depression is so bad in the South, however, that there is a government shutdown for 200 days in 1931, which all hell breaks loose in the Confederacy, which makes President McAdoo very unpopular. In 1932, President Hoover passes the gas tax. Again, this does damage to the Union States economy. But in the election, Progressive Governor Franklin Roosevelt defeats Republican President Herbert Hoover 271 to 56 to become the 30th President of the Union States. So yeah, Roosevelt still beats Hoover in this timeline. 1933, however, President Roosevelt passes the 21st Amendment, which is the Lame Duck Amendment. President Roosevelt declares a bank holiday, so he does that still. Presidents Roosevelt and McAdoo both declare a national emergency. McAdoo kind of late to that. The U.S. and CS passes their own versions of the Agricultural Adjustment Act, which is beneficial to the agricultural lands within both countries. But, however, both countries passes the 22nd and 17th Amendment respectively, which ends Prohibition. They're like, okay, this is a crap idea. Let's just end it. Okay, but the 1933 Confederate election, Whig revolutionary Martin King, who led the Freedom Revolution rebels, and he defeats Democrat Vice President John Garner to become the 12th Confederate president and the second Whig president, which is robust amongst the rebels and white supporters of the cause. In 1934, President King declares a bank holiday. He proposed working with the Union States to overcome this great tragedy. He calls it of the Great Depression, and he works with President Roosevelt to see what he needs to do, and he declares a bank holiday. And, of course, President Roosevelt withdraws the troops from Haiti that had been there for a while now. In 1935, the USCS passes their own version of the Social Security Act into law, so both countries have Social Security now. In 1936, progressive President Franklin Delano Roosevelt defeats Republican Senator Alf Landon 316-8 to win re-election. Again, Roosevelt defeats Landon, and he wins re-election. 1937, the Confederate economy rises back up to reasonable numbers. Martin King passes multiple tax cuts, multiple bills that would favor the economy, and it both rises back up to where it was before the Depression. And Roosevelt passes the Marijuana Tax Act in this time. 1938, both countries passes the Minimum Wage Act, so there you go. The 1939 Confederate election is in this year, but first we have to talk about the U.S. and the Union States and the Confederacy both declare neutrality in the ongoing World War II. What that is happening between Europe, Russia, and all that, and Eurasia. They want to just figure out how to fix their economy, and the Confederacy might have a better economy now, but they still have stuff to do. President Martin Luther King decides not to run again. He feels like he's done everything he can in just 6 years, and he supports just a one-term thing, but he knows what the Constitution says. But the former Vice President to William McAdoo, John Garner, defeats the Whig Party chairman, the nationwide Whig Party chairman, Earl Warren, 191-30 to become the 13th Confederate president. But at the beginning of his term, he declares war on Germany. This is something he would run on. He'd be like, let's get in that war and show people why the Confederacy is the greatest country in the world. And he goes and declares war on Germany. President Roosevelt signs a bill increasing naval spending before the 1940 election, which he can't run in because the 22nd Amendment that is in our time has already passed. The two-term limit amendment, that's already passed. Progressive Vice President, when Henry Wallace was Roosevelt's Vice President, he would run and win the nomination for the Progressive Party, and he would defeat Republican Governor Wendell Willkie 167-157 to become the 31st U.S. President. In 1941, Japanese attacks both countries. They can attack Confederate naval base Pearl Harbor. Poor Pearl Harbor, they're just getting attacked all over this timeline. And they also attack the Empire State Building. And as you can see here, I have a picture that have happened in real life, but it's much worse the time. It's kind of similar to 9/11, where instead they don't rebuild it. We just don't have an Empire State Building anymore because of this. It's a very tragic day. You can give it whatever date you want, or you can just call it the day the Empire fell, or whatever. President Wallace declares war on the Axis powers over this, especially Japan. Henry Wallace, John Garner, and Winston Churchill all meet within the UK to discuss, foreign policy, tactics in the war and all that. In 1942, the U.S. economy begins to tank. Henry Wallace fails to, of course, the Great Depression still happens in the Union States because President Roosevelt wasn't there to get us out of this huge crash, I guess you can call it. But this causes the U.S. to withdraw 85% of troops from overseas because of this, which hurts Henry Wallace tremendously. There's nothing in 1943 of note, but in 1944, Nazis surrender to the Allied powers as the CSA goes forward with Operation Downfall. So, if you don't know what Operation Downfall is, look up Alternate History Hub's video on Operation Downfall. It's very interesting. But think of the Confederacy instead of just the entire country. Tensions rise between the USA, the CSA, and the USSR over war benefits and ideologies. The Confederacy is looking at the United States like you couldn't figure out your own country's worries, so before you dealt with another country, and you wasted our time. That's mostly what the CSA is thinking. But due to this, Republican Governor Thomas Dewey defeats Progressive President Henry Wallace 170-146 to become the 32nd President of the Union States. So Thomas Dewey does become President. Clap, clap, clap. Congratulations, Mr. Dewey. But anyway, guys, this is the Chaotic One saying peace, and I hope you're enjoying the series so far.